Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump is putting pressure on Europe for buying Russian oil. What Trump says about the $1 billion Europe sends to Russia per year and how this affects the war. The city of Washington filed a lawsuit today accusing the Trump administration of interfering in domestic affairs. The suit seems to conflict with the mayor's recent order for local coordination with the president. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has heated exchanges with lawmakers during a Senate Finance Committee hearing. The HHS Secretary clashes with senators over vaccines and more. The Pentagon has allowed military lawyers to be immigration judges. Some critics argue the move undermines the integrity of courts, a legal analysis coming up. How does the CCP control the discourse on topics like forced organ harvesting outside its borders? What tactics does it use?
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Second best day of the week, Thursday. President Trump is putting pressure on Europe for partially funding Russia for its war effort. That's as a group of 30 nations called the Coalition of the Willing is meeting to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has more.
To everybody watching this, please, men and women, citizens of the Czech Republic and all over Europe, Canada and the US, let's not be naive about Russia.
NATO chief Mark Rutte advises citizens across the globe to be cautious of Moscow. He made the statement shortly after a phone call with members of the Coalition of the Willing, which is meeting in Paris on Thursday. The 30 members of the coalition are working on security guarantees for Ukraine.
We know what Putin tries to do, and the evidence is there in Ukraine as we speak, and it is there that threat for the long term, I'm afraid.
President Trump also joined the meeting via phone call. The White House commented on the call, saying President Trump emphasized that Europe must stop purchasing Russian oil that is funding the war, as Russia received 1.1 billion euros in fuel sales from the EU in 1 year. The president also emphasized that European leaders must place economic pressure on China for funding Russia's war efforts. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are leading Thursday's summit. They insist that any European reassurance force in Ukraine needs the backing of the US. On Wednesday, Macron said the plans for guarantees were finalized and ready to be presented to the coalition. But for now, the plans are still classified. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
The city of Washington today filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration and the military over the deployment of the National Guard in the nation's capital. The city is accusing the president and some cabinet members, as well as the army, of getting involved in domestic law enforcement. The lawsuit comes 1 day after a California federal judge ruled that the administration illegally deployed the Guard and Marines in Los Angeles, saying local police were willing to handle the violence that erupted there. Washington's elected Attorney General Brian Schwab brought the suit despite Mayor Muriel Bowser's recent order requiring ongoing local coordination with federal officials. The president's 30-day emergency declaration is set to expire on September 10th. Vice President J.D. Vance says the administration has no immediate plans to deploy the National Guard to Chicago. The comments come after some remarks from President Trump hinting that such a deployment could happen.
There are no immediate plans, but the president has said he has the legal authority to protect American citizens, whether that's in Chicago or Washington, D.C. Obviously, as the president has said, we want the governor to be a partner here. We would love it, Democrat or Republican, if we had governors who were willing to actually be partners in cutting down crime in our country. Unfortunately, it looks like that's not what we have in J.B. Pritzker.
Vance's remarks come after Trump on Tuesday said, "We're going in to the crime-heavy Midwest city." Over 50 people were shot and killed, 8 killed during the recent Labor Day weekend. Trump wrote that Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker needs help badly. He doesn't know it just yet. Trump referenced his recent deployment of the National Guard to Washington, D.C. He suggested the same could happen in Chicago, writing, "Chicago will be safe again." On Tuesday, Trump told reporters, quote, "I didn't say when we're going in," and on Wednesday, he told reporters that troops could possibly be sent to Chicago or a place like New Orleans. Last month, Governor Pritzker said that Trump is manufacturing a crisis and politicizing Americans who serve in uniform. A federal judge has struck down the Trump administration's attempt to freeze more than $2 billion in Harvard University's federal funding. Judge Allison Burroughs ruled yesterday that Trump's move was more about punishing Harvard's views than addressing anti-Semitism. She said the administration used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen, and there was little connection between the research affected by grant terminations and anti-Semitism. Judge Burroughs pointed to Trump's social media posts suggesting the funding freeze was retaliation against Harvard's views. The ruling lifts the freeze and blocks the government from issuing further restrictions on Harvard's funding. The White House said it would appeal, arguing Harvard failed to protect students from harassment and does not have a right to taxpayer money. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to step in on a major tariff case. The White House wants the justices to review a lower court ruling that struck down most of President Trump's global tariffs. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more, including reactions from U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on the importance of restoring American production.
The Trump administration last night filed a petition asking for a fast-track review on a case that says the president's tariffs overstepped his authority. The administration says the case is one of the most important to ever go before the High Court.
The money coming in is incredible. And again, they use them on us. If we didn't have them, they would use them on us, and we would have no way to fight them.
President Trump says everything is at stake.
I can only say this. Our country has a chance to be unbelievably rich again, but it can also be unbelievably poor again.
The appeal warns that allowing the ruling to stand could trigger dangerous diplomatic embarrassment, expose the U.S. to retaliation, and derail ongoing trade negotiations.
We made a deal with the European Union where they're paying us almost $1 trillion, and they're happy to do it. You know what? They're happy it's done. These deals are all done. I guess we'd have to unwind them.
The administration argues tariffs have been a vital tool in diplomacy, helping Washington respond to crises such as fentanyl imports that have cost hundreds of thousands of American lives. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said the stakes go beyond tariffs, pointing to the need for a strong production economy to thrive, speaking at the National Conservatism 2025 conference.
A production economy is one that's oriented around production rather than consumption as an end in itself. This kind of economy emphasizes a large middle class that makes and grows rather than a small elite that extracts, reallocates, and squanders.
Greer says Washington bureaucrats abandoned America's production economy for a debtor economy to curry favor with big business and trading partners between the early 1990s and 2016.
We signed away our sovereignty by opening our borders to unprecedented and nearly unlimited flows of foreign labor, as we just heard from Tom Homan, foreign capital, foreign goods, and foreign services.
The trade representative says American factories that closed did not switch from making steel to making semiconductors, devastating communities.
In far too many cases, they went from being vibrant hubs of production, manufacturing ecosystems, to concentrations of welfare, poverty, and even despair.
Greer says the goals for trade policy shouldn't be to make the most trade deals or drive efficiency at all cost, but to promote American workers and their families. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
President Trump is set to host more than 24 tech and business leaders at a Rose Garden dinner today. Media outlet The Hill obtained an invite list with expected guests including Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Apple's Tim Cook, Microsoft's Bill Gates, and OpenAI's Sam Altman. It's the first event in the newly renovated Rose Garden patio, modeled after Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. The gathering will take place after a White House AI event led by First Lady Melania Trump. The Trump administration is moving to terminate protections for Venezuelan migrants. The Department of Homeland Security is set to end a 2021 agreement granting nearly 270,000 immigrants temporary protected status, or TPS. The department says Venezuela no longer meets the requirements for TPS, or temporary protected status. A DHS spokesperson said allowing Venezuelan nationals to remain in the U.S. is not in the country's best interest. Officials have offered self-deportees a $1,000 bonus to self-deport. This comes after the administration announced the end of TPS for immigrants from Afghanistan, Cameroon, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, and Nicaragua. Those actions have met legal challenges, with lawsuits arguing they're rooted in racial animus. The Trump administration has opened a new detention site for illegal immigrants inside a Louisiana prison. Officials say it's aimed at housing the worst of the worst. Here's Governor Landry.
This facility is fulfilling the president's promise of making America safe again. How? By giving ICE a facility to consolidate the most violent offenders into a single deportation and holding facility.
This facility will hold the most dangerous of criminals that have been out there harming individuals in this country. It will be high-risk alien individuals and criminals.
It is a national model for states seeking to protect their citizens. We're going after gang members, human traffickers, drug dealers, and other violent illegal aliens, all working hand in hand.
The new facility is housed inside Angola, a prison with a history of brutality, riots, and executions dating back to more than a century. Officials say the prison's tough reputation is exactly why it was chosen, to hold who they say are the most dangerous of criminals. Officials say the Louisiana lockup will grow to more than 400 detainees in the coming months, targeting gang members, drug traffickers, and repeat offenders. The facility is part of a $45 billion expansion signed by President Trump to give ICE the resources to detain more than 100,000 illegal immigrants. The Pentagon has authorized up to 600 military lawyers to serve as temporary immigration judges. Joining us now to discuss this is political strategist and attorney Gerard Filitti. He's a senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Good to see you, Gerard, as always. Let me ask you, is there a precedent of using military personnel in judicial roles?
Not really. This is a little bit of an uncharted territory, and part of that has to do with federal laws that might actually get in the way of President Trump achieving his objective. Now, it's a good idea in theory, especially because there is a shortage of immigration lawyers or immigration court judges to work on these deportations. That's been a problem for years, but there are some legal impediments that may actually hinder this from happening.
And can you talk to us about those legal obstacles? And Trump has framed this as a solution to the backlog of roughly 3.5 million cases.
It's certainly a solution and a good one, but he will likely need congressional support in order to get this done. Now, let's take a step back. An immigration law judge works for the Department of Justice. This is a civilian position. It's not an Article 3. It's not a federal court judge. It's not a state court judge. This is an administrative law position within the Department of Justice. So holding and exercising the powers of an immigration judge is what's called a civil office in the executive branch. And there is federal law that prevents active duty military personnel from exercising a civil office while they remain on active duty. So this poses a problem for President Trump because while he can use lawyers that are civilian lawyers in the Department of Defense, for example, he cannot use active duty JAG lawyers to work as immigration judges.
Can you talk to us about whether there is a national security element to this? Could the immigration backlog itself be a national security vulnerability?
It certainly is a national security vulnerability. It is something that Donald Trump has framed as a national security vulnerability for a long time now. And he uses national security concerns for a lot of the deportations that have been brought to the immigration courts. The issue ultimately is not that it's a national security concern, which properly framed it is, but there needs to be an exception in federal law for these national security concerns in order for President Trump to use military lawyers. So until Congress sits down and works with President Trump to provide that exception, the law right now bars him from doing this.
And as well, Gerard, some critics are arguing that the move undermines the integrity of courts. What is your response to that?
You know, it's hard to see how it undermines the integrity of courts. You have very qualified lawyers. JAG lawyers in the Defense Department are among the best and brightest. They are very well experienced. They have a lot of experience with actual trials on both sides, as prosecutors and as defense attorneys. They bring a rich diversity of experience and are perfectly suited to be immigration law judges. And they meet all the qualifications to do that. So there's nothing here that would prevent a military lawyer serving in that capacity from exercising the best judgment and upholding the laws.
But I want to point to an NPR report that says some of the military lawyers will receive Around 2 weeks of training to serve as judges. Is that long enough?
It may very well be, because again, we're talking about experienced lawyers. We're talking about lawyers who are familiar with a courtroom because they've argued many cases in one. The lawyers, we know how the courts work. We know what judges do. It's a matter of understanding procedure, which you learn very quickly, and understanding ethical considerations, which again, there are plenty of books that guide you through ethics considerations. So 2 weeks is plenty of time for an experienced lawyer to become an administrative law judge.
Would you say getting more permanent hires could be a solution as well to address the backlog?
Permanent hires would be a great solution. That requires adding line item items to the adding money to the budget on a line item basis for these positions within the Justice Department. And this is something that no administration has done in recent times. And there is a significant backlog. President Trump wants to use about 600 lawyers from the Defense Department, but even that would not meet the current needs in terms of how many judges are needed. So it would absolutely be essential to get funding for these positions. And this is, again, something that President Trump can work with Congress on for the next budget bill.
But to your point, I want to point to another report. According to PBS, more than 100 immigration judges in the last several months have been either fired, reassigned, or resigned under the current administration. I mean, does that seem to be at odds with the stated goal of reducing backlog?
Well, it looks on its surface as at odds, but you also have to consider why these people were removed from their positions. And the Trump administration's argument has been, quite frankly, that a lot of these judges were not doing their jobs, or that they were exhibiting bias, or that they themselves were the ones who were protracting these procedures, holding them for much longer time than necessary, and creating that backlog. So while it may seem counterintuitive that reducing the number of judges is a good thing, if those judges were responsible for the backlog, then you do want them gone.
Okay, one last question. Do you see this going up to the Supreme Court? And if it does, how do you think the judges will decide on this case?
Well, I think President Trump has to act very carefully here. The question on who has standing to bring this to the Supreme Court, right now it's not clear that anyone does. However, if someone goes before a military lawyer who is serving as an immigration judge under Trump's order, that presents a case that will be appealable through the federal courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. And any decisions that are made in that case are likely to be overturned, and the case would have to start all over again. So it behooves the Trump administration to do everything possible to ensure there is sound legal basis for this decision.
Okay, well, Gerard, always great to speak with you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has heated exchanges with lawmakers during the Senate Finance Committee hearing. The HHS secretary clashes with senators over vaccines and more. Stay tuned for that story when we return.
Hi, I'm Amy Grant. I was living with a rare heart condition, and the doctor said if I didn't take care of it, it would become catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life, and I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. Like so many women, I pushed through no matter what. But I've learned you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of other people.
I had a pretty normal mom life. Everything was pretty good, and it was a very happy life. I was given the diagnosis that I had peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically a pregnancy-induced heart failure. They told me my only chance was a heart transplant.
And the American Heart Association helped make that possible. Their research helped save me.
Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care.
I am very thankful for the American Heart Association. I'm grateful for just every day that I get with my children.
Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives.
It's hard to imagine that a mom can die from pregnancy-induced heart failure, but thousands die every year. That's why your support is so urgently needed.
any of us, every one of us, can make a modest monthly donation that actually helps and benefits everybody. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor. Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is appearing before a congressional committee where he's facing questions about changes at federal health agencies. During today's hearing, Kennedy defended recent firings and policy decisions at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The HHS Secretary pointed to the CDC's response to the COVID pandemic as a major reason for change.
I would like to address the recent shakeups at CDC. These changes were absolutely necessary adjustments to restore the agency to its role as the world's gold standard public health agency with the central mission of protecting Americans from infectious disease. CDC failed that responsibility miserably during COVID, when its disastrous and nonsensical policies destroyed small businesses, violated civil liberties, closed our schools, caused generational damage in doing so, massed infants with no science, and heightened economic inequality. And yet all those oppressive and unscientific interventions failed to do anything about the disease itself.
Kennedy said the CDC requires new leadership. The HHS Secretary pushed for removing officials with conflicts of interest and, quote, catastrophically bad judgment and political agendas. Kennedy's comments follow the Trump administration's firing of the agency's director, Susan Monarez. Monarez wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed today that she was pressured to pre-approve recommendations of his vaccine advisory panel. Kennedy denied those accusations at today's hearing. The HHS Secretary also clashed with senators over new vaccine policies under his leadership.
It is the American people's health that's on the line here. This is the last thing, by the way, our parents need when their kids are going back to school, is to have the kind of confusion and expense and scarcity that you're creating as a result of your ideology.
All the evidence is transparent.
Will you make it in advance transparent for the American people so they can comment on it?
All the evidence is transparent for the first time in history, and you were never there complaining when the pharmaceutical companies were picking those people and then running their products through with no safety testing.
Kennedy's testimony today follows the Food and Drug Administration's approval of updated COVID shots last month. The FDA said the vaccine would be available for seniors and younger people with underlying health risks. Kennedy said drug makers did not provide the FDA with studies showing their vaccines significantly benefit healthy children and adults. President Trump's nominee for Federal Reserve Governor Stephen Miron is testifying before the Senate Banking Committee. Questions from senators focused on the independence of the Fed.
In my view, the most important job of the central bank is to prevent depressions and hyperinflations. Independence of monetary policy is a critical element for its success. Given the central bank's outsized role in the economy, it's no surprise that outsiders have opined on its decisions for decades. However, if confirmed, I plan to dutifully carry out my role pursuant to the mandates assigned by Congress. My opinions and decisions will be based on my analysis of the macroeconomy and what's best for its long-term stewardship.
Myran is currently chair of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. He backs Trump's view that the Fed should slash interest rates, and last year he wrote a paper arguing the president should be able to fire Fed governors at will. Missouri lawmakers began a special session yesterday to redraw the state's map of congressional districts. It's the latest state to join the redistricting battle in the race for the most U.S. House seats. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Missouri State Legislature held a special session on Wednesday to draw a new congressional map. This move has officially inserted the state into the nationwide redistricting battle. The delegation is currently split between 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats and could see the state add an additional Republican majority district to its 8-member congressional delegation. Republican State Representative Dirk Deaton made a first read of Bill HB 1, which creates provisions for the redistricting changes. Called the Missouri First Map, the revised version would keep all current members of Missouri's congressional delegation in the current districts, but split fewer counties and municipalities, while preserving 2 of the current districts. Missouri follows California as the 3rd state to pursue a mid-decade redistricting. California's legislature has approved the redrawing effort, but the state's law requires a vote from the people. Texas was the first to take up the effort, expected to result in Republicans picking up 5 more congressional seats. The Missouri House will reconvene on Thursday at 10 a.m. Meanwhile, a 4th state, Ohio, is preparing for its congressional redistricting process. Residents can begin submitting their own redistricting plans to state lawmakers through a new state website. Under Ohio's constitution, the state map-making process doesn't follow the census, which occurs every 10 years. Ohio's voter-approved redistricting rules mandate that the state redraw its maps in the middle of the decade if its initial map passed without the necessary bipartisan support. Ohio lawmakers have until September 30th to draw a bipartisan-supported map. In Utah, a judge on Tuesday ordered state lawmakers to redraw their congressional map, pointing to Texas and California. The judge rejected their argument that a 1-month deadline to adopt a new map that complies with voter-approved standards is too short. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
As lawmakers return to D.C., the controversy over the Epstein files sparks up again. Republican House leadership has moved to take lead on the issue while many remain unsatisfied. NTD's congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf has the updates.
Yesterday's House vote on the Epstein-related resolution was essentially a show of support for the ongoing House oversight investigation into the Epstein case, not directly a vote on the Epstein files. The resolution formally authorizes the oversight panel to continue its ongoing investigation and look into circumstances surrounding Epstein's death, the operation of his sex trafficking rings, and ways for the federal government to effectively combat them. Now, this vote on the resolution comes just 1 day after the Republican-led House Oversight Committee released more than 33,000 pages of documents related to Epstein and Maxwell's cases, though some say there was not much new information contained in those documents, and they're asking for more.
Less than 1% of these files have been released. We are demanding today on the discharge petition that all of the files be released.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has repeatedly said that he supports transparency, but also says that that particular bill does not do enough to protect the victims. Yesterday, victims of Epstein's crimes met with several lawmakers, including the House Speaker.
One of the things that came out of the meeting that we had yesterday with the 6 victims, they told the most horrific stories. We also had 4 of their lawyers there. 2 of these lawyers have been working on this for 20 years. That's when the civil litigation began. They know where everything is, right? And so they can inform us, and we can utilize them as a resource to go deeper.
On another note, a bipartisan group of lawmakers is pushing for a congressional stock trading ban. This issue has been on the table for quite some time. Several lawmakers from both parties have pushed legislation that would ban lawmakers from trading stock. The newest one was introduced by Republican Congressman Chip Roy and Democrat Congressman Seth Magaziner. The bill, called the Restore Trust in Congress Act, seeks to ban members of Congress, their spouses, dependent children, and trustees from buying and selling individual stocks. If passed, it would also apply to current members, requiring them to divest from their holdings.
Capital Trades, for example, reports that 113 members of Congress made 9,261 trades in 2024 involving 706 million shares of other assets. That's not why people sent us here to Washington.
There are those who are determined to root out corruption and those who are wedded to the status quo. And the status quo has been in effect for far too long.
Though this issue seems to have significant support from both sides of the aisle in both chambers of Congress, it never seems to get enough momentum to get past the halls of Congress. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The suspect accused of murdering 2 Israeli embassy staffers pleaded not guilty today. Authorities have called the shooting an anti-Israel hate crime. Elias Rodriguez of Chicago faces 9 federal charges, including murder of a foreign official and perpetrating a hate crime resulting in death. Prosecutors have alleged that Rodriguez was motivated by hatred of Israel when he fatally shot Yaron Lischinski and Sarah Lynn Milgram. Rodriguez allegedly gunned down the staffers as they were leaving the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on May 21st. Rodriguez told police at the scene, quote, "I did it for Palestine, and I did it for Gaza." The 31-year-old allegedly posted a manifesto online declaring that Israel supporters had, quote, forfeited their humanity. Rodriguez faces a possible death penalty if convicted. Airlines will not have to pay passengers for flight disruptions in the U.S. In December, the Transportation Department opened up public comments about whether airlines should have to pay for delays. This was under the Biden administration. Under the proposal, for delays lasting at least 3 hours, travelers could receive up to $300 in cash compensation. For longer delays, the payment would have soared to nearly $800. The White House posted a document today that said the department plans to withdraw the notice. How does the CCP control the discourse on topics like forced organ harvesting outside its borders? What tactics does it use? We talk to an expert after the break.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanted to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
I debate all day. It's what I do. But there are some things that are undebatable, like your mental health, my own mental health. I was in a dark place when my brother passed away in a car accident. I've never been more devastated than the day I lost my mom. I was depressed, miserable, in ways I never imagined. I reached out, and my sisters came. My pastor, my therapist. They helped me get through it. I found that the more I spoke up, the healthier my mind became. The chaos that was in me began to subside. I was more focused, clear. When you love your mind, you can go so much further. That's not up for debate. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org.
When I arrived in the U.S. at 19, I struggled to find job opportunities without a high school diploma. My name is Ariel, and my entire life changed when I took a chance and I got my high school diploma at age 22. Everything I have, my education, my career, my marriage, I owe to the Adult Literacy Center and my teachers. They were with me every step of the way, helping with my English and math, making sure I pushed through all the challenges.
So Ariel, we made this yearbook for you. It has notes from all the people that are here. Your achievement has set an example for so many students. Most importantly, your daughter.
Education was the key that unlocked all my opportunities.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
Turning to a major drug case, a federal grand jury in Ohio has indicted 3 U.S. citizens, 22 Chinese nationals, and 4 Chinese pharmaceutical companies. They're accused of taking part in an international drug trafficking and money laundering conspiracy. Prosecutors say the network supplied illegal cutting agents used to boost the potency of fentanyl, fueling the opioid epidemic in southern Ohio and beyond. Authorities allege the Chinese companies openly marketed and shipped chemicals they knew would be used in fentanyl mixtures. Transactions often paid for with cryptocurrency. The U.S. Treasury also announced new sanctions against one of the companies and its representatives. FBI Director Kash Patel says Operation Box Cutter seized enough fentanyl powder to kill 70 million Americans and enough fentanyl pills to kill another 270,000. Patel says one of the first decisions he made in his role as director was to pursue fentanyl sources in mainland China. In an interview on Fox News, Patel said, quote, "We're going to suffocate the snake. We're going to cut off its head." The United States and Mexico are tightening security ties. A high-level meeting yesterday reaffirmed the two countries' fight against drug cartels, arms trafficking, and illegal immigration. Here's more on that story.
The U.S. and Mexico have reaffirmed a security and immigration agreement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and Foreign Secretary Ramon de la Fuente in Mexico City on Wednesday.
Just briefly, we had an excellent meeting with President Sheinbaum and Foreign Minister de la Fuente. In fact, we've had a great relationship with the government of Mexico during the 8 months of the Trump presidency. It is the closest security cooperation we have ever had, maybe with any country, but certainly in the history of U.S.-Mexico relations.
The two nations will continue working together against drug cartels, arms smuggling, and illegal immigration, but made clear it would be done from their respective sides of the border, respecting each other's sovereignty.
Los gobiernos de México y Estados Unidos.
The governments of Mexico and the United States reaffirm our cooperation on security matters, which is based on the principles of reciprocity, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Respeto a la soberanía.
The State Department says the partnership aims to dismantle cartels, curb fentanyl, and maintain historic low illegal immigration numbers at the border. But the talks were overshadowed by a U.S. military strike just a day earlier on a suspected drug boat from Venezuela. Secretary Rubio discussed the administration's action on Wednesday.
If you're on a boat full of cocaine or fentanyl or whatever headed to the United States, you're an immediate threat to the United States. And the president, under his authority as commander-in-chief, has a right under exigent circumstances to eliminate imminent threats to the United States.
The strike drew sharp criticism from Venezuela's interior minister, who called it an illegal massacre in international waters. Opposition leader Enrique Capriles questioned both governments' accounts, pressing for answers about who was killed. In Houston, meanwhile, federal agents Wednesday unveiled the largest seizure of drug-making chemicals in U.S. history. More than 600,000 pounds of precursor material, which they say was originally shipped from China and was headed to the Sinaloa cartel.
This is the first president who decided that the Sinaloa cartel is a foreign terrorist organization that gives us the ability to move quickly and gives us the ability to seize property anywhere in the world if it is connected to one of these organizations.
Officials say the chemicals, enough to produce methamphetamine worth more than $500 million, were diverted after being intercepted on the high seas.
The ability to attain the warrant for this was only possible because President Trump's executive order designating the Department of State to designate major drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. After seizing these two shipments, HSI International worked closely with our foreign law enforcement partners to consolidate the shipments in Panama and divert them here to the port of Houston.
Customs and Border Protection says the barrels were tied directly to the Sinaloa cartel.
This seizure represents one of the largest interdictions of its kind in history, and highlights the critical role of interagency collaboration and intelligence sharing in combating threats posed by drug trafficking organizations and terrorist groups.
Officials say the seizure is part of a push to eliminate cartels and transnational criminal organizations that threaten American sovereignty.
A hot mic captured the leaders of China and Russia discussing increasing longevity through continuous organ transplants. Joining us now to discuss is Cynthia Sun, researcher at the Falun Dafa Information Center and fellow at the First Freedom Foundation. Good afternoon, Cynthia. Thank you for coming on again. So your initial reactions here, what was going through your mind when you first heard them discussing this?
Thanks for having me on, Don. And to be honest, it was quite chilling. I had goosebumps when I heard that hot mic. And I actually had a conversation last night with the only known forced organ harvesting survivor from China, Mr. Cheng, who, famously survived organ harvesting and escaped China barely with his life intact. And he was telling me that this hot mic moment with Xi Jinping actually gave him a nightmare of how the future of China would look like, how his friends and fellow people of faith would die from this supposed, miracle in biotech, if you would like to call it that. The vision that Xi Jinping has just horrifies him because he knows that if he was able to live through organ harvesting in China, it's possible that hundreds of thousands died since his procedure failed in the end to kill him. And so, going even to the next 10 years, if China is planning on exponentially increasing the number of organ transplants that they have in China, then it could possibly mean 1 million people exploited.
Wow, that is chilling. I mean, for years we've heard about this. The US, EU, and UN have raised alarms for many, many years, and multiple bodies and experts have concluded that the practice of forced organ harvesting continues even today. So why has it been so difficult to stop this from happening?
There are still people who believe mistakenly that China is becoming a democracy. And I think there are some people, even in our community of medicine, for example, Dr. Francis Delmonico in Boston, who has been seduced by the lies that China has purported. In 2017, he went on this trip to China with the WHO and explored all of these hospitals, saw firsthand how transplantations were going. But as we know, these trips to China are nothing but honeymoon trips that completely obscure what's really going on. China is not going to show you the crimes against humanity they're committing. Xi Jinping has everything to lose by showing American doctors and investigators what is really going on. And so we only have testimonies from people like Mr. Cheng and other independent investigators who are looking through satellite images, digging through data, going to Chinese doctors who are actually whistleblowing the situation, the true situation of what's going on, to rely on right now. And that's the reality. And I think in the future, if this reality continues, I can't even imagine how many people of faith, prisoners of conscience, we call them, and ethnic minorities like Falun Gong, Uyghurs, Tibetans, or even other Chinese people are going to be killed through this murder for profit system. It's a horrific reality that I think a lot of Americans and good-natured people are unwilling to accept just because it's just so inhumane that it's hard to accept how horrific this situation really is.
And you bring up an important point here that the CCP is hiding this, right? And that it's spreading lies. How exactly does the CCP, control the discourse on topics like forced organ harvesting, even outside its borders? Can you talk to us about the tactics being used here?
Yeah, so for example, Dr. Francis Delmonico, he has a very long history of medical ethics, of transplantation work, and he's has all of these accolades over his career, which are very impressive. But unfortunately, he's fallen for the lies that the Chinese Communist Party has told him. And so now the residents under him, the doctors that work under him in Boston, and all of the fellows and different students that are taking his classes or are attending his seminars, they really respect him and for his work, for his career. And I think because of the domino effect of how information flows in science, how it flows in our news cycle, it's inevitable that some of these will trickle through. And another example would be Google. If you search up organ harvesting or you search up a censored topic, a lot of the times on the first 1 or 2 pages, you'll see the Chinese consulate or other state media and their narrative popping up, just because that's how SEO works. They take government websites to be higher up on the chain of command, and human rights organizations like ours are less important compared to government websites. And so I think we have to fight back with information because even, last year, the New York Times released something and they had a paragraph about a professor claiming that organ harvesting in China doesn't exist. So I think this flow of information really needs to be fact-checked at all levels. And we're just very sensitive, and we have a lot of loopholes in our information system that have already been infiltrated.
So you talk about we have to fight back. In that point, how effective has legislation like the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act been raising awareness or driving change?
Yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, like I said about SEO earlier, Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2025 is actually on the first page. If you search up forced organ harvesting China, regardless of what browser you use, it will be in the top 10 results. And so I think it's important to continue that, regardless of whether it's school websites, school newspapers, which also have high SEO, or our own government releasing reports, having hearings on it, which I think is a continuing effort, or even other governments like the EU or Canada also holding different hearings and stuff. I think the more people have this information sharing, it becomes a discourse that is able to flourish outside of Chinese control. So even for journalists who are studying this issue, regardless of what media you're at, I think it's important to continue researching and investigating and pressing China. Like, keep the pressure on. If you take the heat off, China has nothing to show. Like, they're not going to freely give you information. So I think we just have to keep the pressure on.
And I want to continue on that point. Can you elaborate further, perhaps give more examples as well? What can everyday people do to help raise awareness on this issue?
Yeah, I was actually on a panel last week talking about this exact issue. And my issue with these calls to actions is most people can't relate. They're either not journalists or they don't work in government, and so they feel like they can't do anything, but that's simply not true. I think, wherever you stand, whatever your life is like, or whatever your interests are, start from there. Say you're a patient who is on the organ donation waiting list here in the States, and your friends or a doctor or someone tells you that you can get it in China for free. For example, a lung for free or for much cheaper. Sorry, and this type of information is someone is benefiting from that. And it seems to be too good to be true. And I feel like a lot of people are, taken by how good the offer is, et cetera. And they don't realize the full scope of the story. So if, you're in that situation, then obviously that's where you start off with. You have to tell people like, no, actually organ harvesting is happening. The transplants in China are unethical. And, I'm not willing to do that for an organ because someone is dying for this organ and I can't have their blood on my hands. So that's one way to go about it. Or if family or friends who are in a similar situation, then you can tell them. Or if you're a doctor, and you go to these medical symposiums, start from there. Wherever you feel like is within your interests and within your circle that you feel like can actually help make a difference. There's multiple ways. Social media is one of the many ways you can just share about this issue. Say on Twitter, it takes 10 seconds to tweet how horrifying this hot mic moment is. So I think people just should start from what they're used to and what they're able.
And Cynthia, just one last thing briefly. I understand that you gave a testimony, a written one, to the Congressional Executive Commission on China about forced organ harvesting. You talked about detailed firsthand accounts of blood testing and medical examinations of Falun Gong practitioners, right? Can you tell us more about this? What is the CCP doing? What processes are involved?
Yeah, so just briefly, it started when I interviewed these survivors who were able to get out of China through one way or another and reunite with their families overseas. A lot of them are here in the States. Their families are US citizens. So I wanted to ask them what their detention situation was like, what type of torture they experienced in custody, and if Falun Gong practitioners were treated any different. And I actually found extremely shocking answers from these individuals. Basically, within the first 48 hours of their detention, they're blood tested. And in some cases, they even told me the prison wardens only called out Falun Gong practitioners. And when they talked with other prisoners, they found out if they weren't practicing Falun Gong, the faith, then they weren't called for these blood testing. Or sometimes, there was this one individual who was blindfolded and taken to a van. He was shipped to the hospital, and at the hospital, the nurse made him go through all kinds of examinations, including electrocardiogram tests, x-rays, and everything to check whether his organs were healthy or not. And you wouldn't do that normally to someone who you're already torturing in custody. He was being beaten, he was being starved, and he was on the brink of death in many cases. And so normally a prison guard wouldn't go through all of these medical tests for his health, right? And so it was only after his sentence was up that he realized, coming back into society, that forced organ harvesting could have happened to him. And so I really wanted to bring that out to light. And even though that wasn't the intent of the interviews, I think we managed to find a place where we could actually have the testimony up live for the world to see. And there's a lot of information that I wasn't able to include in there for security's sake, but this is still an ongoing issue. And so hopefully, we'll have an updated report in 2026, excuse me. And I know a lot of other organizations are working on the same thing.
Wow, what you described, truly horrific. We thank you very much for all the work that you've done on this topic, and we thank you for coming on to talk to us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The president of Northwestern University is stepping down. Michael Schill announced his resignation today as the institution deals with federal funding cuts by the Trump administration. Schill has led the university for 3 years. He said in a statement that he would remain on the position until an interim president is named. In April, the Trump administration froze nearly $800 million in research funding for Northwestern. The freeze came after accusations the university wasn't doing enough to address anti-Semitism during campus protests against the war in Gaza. A White House spokesperson said the Trump administration looks forward to working with the new leadership at Northwestern. For the first time, a federal immigration agency has been cleared to act law enforcement agents. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is in charge of administering the nation's immigration and naturalization system. In a press release, the agency announced that it has been authorized to expand its law enforcement authorities. Under a final rule published today, this will allow its agents to investigate, arrest, and present for prosecution individuals who break immigration laws. The press release explains that agents will have the authority to carry firearms, execute search and arrest warrants, and exercise other powers standard for federal law enforcement. Long work days often mean long hours of sitting, raising the risk of chronic health issues. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with VIP trainer Tommy Akandi about how to stay flexible and mobile.
Tamia Candy says there are simple exercises you can do without leaving your desk.
If you have like a resistance band, for example, you can literally just pull it out and up. And it's quite good because when we sit at our desks, we tend to hunch over. But if you actually get a resistance band and you pull it this way, up and over, it really opens you up. And so instead of having that nodding head syndrome, your head actually tends to stay up, but you're also working your chest and your arms at the same time.
Try sitting on a medicine ball instead of an office chair while at work.
Your core has to be engaged and it has to be activated, and it naturally forces you to sit up straight. And then your legs are also working because they're in that position, so they're actually engaged at the same time.
That elevator may seem easier, but Akandi says you're missing out on a great workout.
I always say to people, if you have stairs at work, take the stairs instead of the lift, because not just you're increasing your lung capacity and overall health, that's amazing for that. Also, you hit your 10,000 steps. But if you do take the stairs and you go up every 2 flights, you're now engaging your quads and your glutes. When you do that, you're burning more muscles over time, so you're actually getting stronger, but you're also losing, if you want to lose weight, you're actually burning extra calories.
With an average 8-hour workday, you can break up the time with many short sessions to stay active.
I think I watched a study recently with Pavlov and Huberman, and he said it's actually better to do little workouts throughout the day instead of one big one. So maybe once an hour, you've got to walk up, stretch your legs. If you go into the kitchen, do 8 squats in there. You can even do a wall sit. A wall sit is perfect. It's basically like a squat, but you put your whole trunk against the wall and you squat all the way down till your hips and your knees are parallel to the floor. And you just hold that for like 30 seconds. So it's basically a plank for your lower body.
Even at a counter, you can fit in a standing plank.
So it's this exercise is called the vacuum, and it works your core and your back at the same time. And as you're literally standing anywhere, standing, sitting, take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, you pull your core, like your belly button, in all the way, as in pretending you're trying to get it all the way to back to the spine. And then you just hold that for maybe like 10 to 20 seconds. And that you can do any time.
Akandi says standing up once an hour, walking around and mixing in small stretches can have a major impact on your health and keep you feeling great. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A video released by Oregon Zoo shows a female African lion who is part of the predators of the Serengeti exhibit, swatting at a hidden camera. A lion lounging in the summer heat at the Oregon Zoo in Portland was distracted by a hidden camera and gave viewers a close-up of the inside of her mouth as she bit it. The video, taken in early August but recently released, shows the female African lion swatting at the camera and then clamping her jaws over it several times. Attorney General Pam Bondi is having a press conference in Tampa, Florida, talking about combating transnational criminal organizations involved in human smuggling. That and more when we come back.
Hi, my name is Brady. When I was born, my parents thought everything was okay. My mom and dad were so excited to take me home.
I still get goosebumps telling this story. Several days in, his skin started to become very cold and clammy. We noticed that he had become blue around his mouth, and something was just very off.
We packed up as fast as we could. Brady stopped breathing twice on the way to the pediatrician. And that was one of the #1 things that just haunts me to this day.
I was born with a congenital heart defect called aortic coarctation. If my parents waited just 1 more hour to drive me to the hospital, I would not be here today. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. But not every kid is as lucky as me, which is why we need your help. Just call the number on the screen or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help. Get people trained in CPR. Get more hospitals certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. And help fund the next medical breakthroughs to help save kids like me.
When you donate to the American Heart Association, you're helping save lives like my son. And now, my son is happy and healthy, thanks to the support of people like you.
When you call with your $19 a month, you'll get this really cool t-shirt as a thank you. Many children die from congenital heart defects. I can't wait to grow up to become a heart surgeon and fix babies' hearts, but until then, I'll keep helping the American Heart Association. So please join me. Just call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org to become a monthly donor and help save lives.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've